going to take a look now at inventory and the inventory management side of SalesPad Cloud. And again, keeping in mind that inventory management is one of our key components and really that key framework of what makes SalesPad Cloud so powerful. And so I'm in one of my companies that I have set up. It's called Peg Leg Cigar. So this is a cigar shop, cigar store. It could be a retail environment with a retail front end. It could be wholesale, B2B distribution. In this case, I've got a number of different locations set up, and we looked at setting up those locations in bins last time. So I have a number of different locations. I have a warehouse location set up. I have a retail location set up. And again, so we're gonna take a look at managing that inventory, and then how creating those new items, the different item types that we have, importing my inventory, and then specifically dive into a few of the item types that make us a little, what we feel, unique. So again, inventory is that core component of cloud. It's one of the key reasons that a customer would be looking at SalesPad Cloud, because of how we manage that inventory. So essentially, we're the inventory subledger for QuickBooks Online. So we maintain your inventory cost stack. You can have different valuations set up, but we maintain all of those that cost stack across each of those items by location within Cloud. And then we're passing the inventory values over to QuickBooks Online. So all of that is maintained within Cloud. So if we go to the inventory navigation on the left, this is our inventory search. So one of the things we see a lot in competitor software is that the user needs to see inventory quantities either across all sites or within a specific site. And so for those other systems, a lot of times it's, I need to go run a report. I need to put in a date range. I need to put in, X, Y, and Z, and then it's going to spit out a report. For SalesPad Cloud, one of the things that sets us apart is that our inventory we show those inventory values immediately on the screen. And so it's essentially real time at that point. So if another user puts in a sales order for this Arturo Fuente 858, then I refresh the screen. I'm going to immediately see my quantity allocated change based off of that order being placed or being entered into the system. So again, this is real time based off of however often you're refreshing that screen. So again, we have a number of different columns on the grid that on our inventory search. And then we can go into any single item. Again, I'll use the same one that I had as an example before. And we can see information specific to this item. So I have my sales, I have my purchases. If this was serial lot tracked, I would have that. I can show pricing. We do vendor items, which we'll talk a little bit about later on. Again, some of the eye candy type things is we have a sales graph that we can display. So this is price, cost, and margin over, in this case, the past 12 months with an ending date on September 1st. And I can break it down by month. And so I can show different things. And we have different graphs, this being a pointed graph. So it just, again, straight lines. So again, I can, if we wanted to change this around, maybe I only want to look at the past 6 months. And so then it just modifies my graph. If I drop down to 4 months, then it's going to modify my graph for me there as well. So again, there's a lot of flexibility here as to and usability as to being able to see how the trending sales trend of this item is over whatever date range I've specified. And then we have some additional, again, audits on the document or on this item. We have inventory. The inventory tab is going to show my inventory across all locations if I'm running multiple bins. And I would see the inventory by bin on the right-hand side. In this case, I am not running multi-bin, just locations. And so I can see my individual locations, quantity within each of those locations. If I were to make those locations inactive, again, I can't do that if there's inventory there. But if I were to zero out of my inventory across all items in that location and mark it inactive, then it's obviously going to drop off of this grid. And then we have the components tab, which we'll talk about in more detail. This will not have any components on it, but we'll go over that here very shortly. And then I have item-specific information here at the top, so I can see what my list price is. I can see my current cost. I can see my average cost, default unit of measure type, my default selling unit of measure, the inventory accounts, asset account, income account, COGS account that we're hitting, what my purchase cost is, and then what my average cost is across my cost stack. So again, I am tracking this item as a FIFO item, and so then this is going to just show me an average cost across that FIFO cost stack. I do have the ability to set an item image and specify an image specifically for this item. So I can click there, pick an image off of my system, add that for that item, and then it will show when I look that up or when I do an inventory search. It would also be available, if needed, that I could print that image on a printed form. So I could print an invoice that has images of each of my items on that invoice. So on our inventory search, again, keeping in mind that inventory is, like I said, it's the backbone of what we're doing with SalesPad Cloud. Again, I have all of my items, so we're going to take a look at creating new items. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. The most obvious way is just by clicking on the new item. We open an item drawer, and I can add this new item into my system. So I'll give this one a name. We're going to call this a Padrone. It'll be a 2000, and then I can specify an item description. And so we also have SKUs. You can add a SKU for this item. I could then specify my item class. And so we would look at using the cigar item class, which is, this is a new cigar item. And at this point, we would be prompted to roll down our item class defaults. Again, I can choose to roll down any of these three that are set and click apply. I can click don't apply, which will completely cancel out of the screen and let me manually set each one of these. Or I can check boxes and maybe I just want to set my valuation method. In this scenario though, I am going to go ahead and take all of those and apply all of my classes. We can specify item group. For us, item group is just another reporting field, so it's just another way to group items together. We have our item types. In this case, this rolled down from my item class. Again, there are multiple item classes or item types here. We'll go over those here in just a few minutes. Actually, we'll just hit those now. So I do have multiple different item types. I have a non-inventory item, which means that I just don't track, it's an item that exists in the item master. I just don't track inventory for the item. I'm not keeping track of it. And so in this case, there's no real cost stack because we don't really keep inventory records for it. So for non-inventory items, the user can edit both the price and the cost on a sales line and set that to whatever they need to, because again, we're not tracking a cost in the system. We have our inventory items, which is again the key piece here. Bundles and pre-assembled bundles, we will review those or go over those in detail shortly, but just for an explanation, a bundle is a kitted item. It's something that I am tracking the components in my inventory at the time of the sale. I may want to sell it as a group of items or as a kit of items. I'm not assembling it ahead of time. And so the bundle item, the parent item, has no cost associated to it. The components, though, do. And so we're not tracking inventory at the bundle item level. Whereas a pre-assembled bundle is a bundle that you have to post an assembly transaction to put inventory into the system for that item. So we are tracking inventory for pre-assembled bundles. So again, I define my components. We track inventory of those components, but I have an assembly transaction that I create. I then post that assembly transaction. That relieves the inventory of my components and then puts inventory in of the pre-assembled bundle item into the system and now establishes a cost stack for that pre-assembled bundle item. So we do track inventory. Pre-assembled bundle items can also be purchased, and so these items could essentially be a make item, or they could be a make and or buy item, and so you're buying them from a vendor. So again, pre-assembled, unlike a bundle you cannot put onto a purchase order. A pre-assembled bundle can be placed onto a purchase order. You can purchase that item, or you can make that item through the assembly process to put inventory into the system. Other charge is just another item type that's familiar from the QBO side. So it's just another type of charge. It could be a miscellaneous charge. It could be, you could define it as a service charge, although there is a service item type. You could call it freight. You could call it deposits. So again, there's multiple different uses for that other charge. Again, it is a non-inventory tracked item. If I add that item of an item type of other charge to a sales document, I can edit both the sales price and the cost on the line for that item type. And then the same for service. Again, this service type items, we're not tracking inventory, but same concept as other charge and non-inventory. I can edit both the price and the cost on a sales document. So those are the item types that exist in the system. And again, we'll hit a bundle and pre-assembled bundle in more detail here very shortly. Next is I can define my list price. There's multiple different uses of list price. If you have a list price specified, when we add this line item to a sales document, we will pull whatever is specified in the list price, unless you are using price levels, which is something we'll go over in just a little bit as well. But price levels will then deviate from that list price. If list price is left at 0, when I add this line to a sales document or add this item to a sales document, the price will start out as 0, and then the user can modify it. We also see users use list price as like the MSRP price, so that this is the price that maybe their competitors or what the vendor recommends or the manufacturer recommends you sell that at. And then we can discount off of this price through our price levels, but yet print both list price and the customer's price on a sales document so they can actually see the difference in that, the savings that they're getting by purchasing this item through your customer. We can flag the item as taxable. If the item is flagged as taxable, or any items that are flagged as taxable on a sales transaction, and the sales transaction has a tax schedule assigned to it, it would then apply tax on that line, sum it from all of those taxable lines, and place that tax on the header, which we'll look at when we go over sales transaction entry. Valuation methods. So on an item, you can specify the valuation method. In this case, mine rolled down from my class. We also can specify a default valuation method at the system settings. And so if I don't roll it down from my class, it would just use the system default. And in this case, I have FIFO, but again, it did come from my class. We do support FIFO, LIFO, average, and standard costing. FIFO is probably what we see used the most. We do see average used quite often, especially for customers coming from QuickBooks Enterprise that are not using advanced inventory management. So again, we'll see, but due to QuickBooks using FIFO, that's what we set our system default to, is FIFO, and so we will we'll default to that FIFO, and again, the user can change that as they need. So we have a couple of cost fields here. We have current cost, standard cost, and purchase cost. So current cost is at the time that the item is created. So when I am creating this item, I can edit the current cost. I can go ahead and tell the system what my current cost is going to be. So in this case, and that's a little bit too expensive for that cigar, so we're going to say that this one is $4.75 in my current cost. Standard cost is standard cost is always editable. I can go and I can change it at any point. Current cost, I can only modify it at the time that I create the item. After I've created the item and I've started receiving inventory, then current cost is updated on each inventory transaction. So if I receive inventory off of a purchase order, whatever price or cost was on that purchase order and on that purchase receipt is then going to be updated and stamped as the current cost on your inventory record. So current cost is essentially, based off of its name, it's what it's calling it. So that is the latest cost in my system based off of whatever my most recent inventory receipt, whether that's through an adjustment, whether that's through a purchase receipt, it is setting that cost for me. So it is not my actual cost, if you will. Again, because we are maintaining a cost stack, in this case I'm using FIFO, if I have inventory that was received at a different cost, and then my most recent inventory was received at $4.75. When I put this item onto a sales document and I post that transaction, it is going to use whatever in this case, oldest cost record is, and it may be at a lower cost or a different cost than what my current cost is showing. So that is not going to be your actual cost. Actual cost you will see at the time of fulfilling and posting your sales transactions. So again, standard cost is just a blank field that I can use for reporting. We will have some future functionality around standard cost. A lot of times what we see is that in some environments, business owners do not want to see do not want their employees to be able to see current cost, but they want them to have some concept of what the cost is. And so a lot of times we will hide current cost and show standard cost to the end user. So we don't have the functionality there now, but that's future functionality that we'll be rolling out. And then purchase cost is the cost that I want to default onto my PO whenever I cut a PO, or even on an inventory in transaction. We will use that purchase cost off of the item master. So again, I could also set this to $4.75, but if I know that typically it's at $5, then I can go ahead and put the $5 in. We can set a primary vendor on the item, so I can go in and I can pick whoever my default vendor is that I purchased this item from. This doesn't mean this is the only vendor I purchase from. It is just my default or my primary vendor. Once we set this record on this vendor, we do create this item on the vendor item tab, showing that this is an item that is assigned to that vendor, and then you could go edit the vendor item number if needed. So quantity decimal places. So this is, it defaults to a 0, but this becomes needed if you are doing partial quantities of any item. So in my scenario, I am selling eaches. So in that case, I never need to have I can't sell a partial each. I can't inventory a partial each. But in other places, if I am tracking by weight, if I am tracking my inventory by weight, or tracking my inventory by some other means, or if this is an item that I can sell partial quantities of my base, then I would need to set my quantity decimal places. We currently support up to 7 quantity decimal places due to that's what QBO supports. Also, once I create an item and I have received inventory of that item, I can only increase my quantity decimal places. I cannot decrease my quantity decimal places while I have inventory in the system. So I can always increase my precision. I can't decrease it unless I take all of my inventory out of the system for that item. So I could do an inventory out adjustment, adjust all of that inventory out, go modify my quantity decimal places up or down, or in that case down, and then import or bring back or do an adjustment in for my inventory to bring it back into the system at the new decimal places or the quantity decimal places. So just something to keep in mind. Serial lot track, we do have support both serial and or lot tracked items. And so if this was either one of those, I could specify that at the time of creating my item. My unit of measure type, this rolled down from my item class. So in this case, it's an each. Because I had default set on my unit of measure type, it also sets my default selling unit of measure and purchasing unit of measure. And again, these are both eaches. I could change these. Maybe my default purchasing unit of measure is a 25 count box. And so for this item, when I purchase it by the box. But then again, once I post my receipt, it's going to go into inventory in my base unit of measure. In this case, it's eaches. I can set a tax code for this item. So again, if the item is taxable, I can specify where it is taxable. We'll talk about taxes at a later date, but I have my tax code on the item that I can set. And then I have my account specification. So if I choose to not set accounts, so there's a hierarchy of where accounts come from. So I set my default accounts or have them set, the system will set them in my settings. So that's across all inventory items. I can set them on my item class and have those roll down as class defaults, or I can set them on an item by item basis. If I have nothing set on the item when I save the item, it is going to then use the defaults that are specified in the system settings for my inventory. I also have a weight field. Again, a weight field for us is just for reporting. We're not using that. We do have some plans for future functionality for weight, but for now it is just a reporting field. And then we have item notes. So you can type up or write in notes about this specific item. Once we have our item information filled out, I am going to go put a list price in since I skipped filling that in. We talked about it, but I didn't put any data there. So once we have our item creation completed, I have the option to either save that, or I can do save and new. Save and new will just will save this item and then take me back to another empty create item drawer. Or I can just click save, and that's going to close that drawer. Oop, and I didn't pick serial lot type. So it's going to close this drawer and take me to that item card. It's another good message that we see here at the top. In this case, I have an item that already exists in the system with that same name. And so I am going to change this up a little bit. We are going to make this the Maduro wrapper as opposed to the natural wrapper. And now I can save it, and it's going to save that item. So again, we do not allow you to create duplicate items if the item exists in the system already. Even if the item exists in the system and it's flagged as inactive, we will not allow you to duplicate that item. So I mentioned the inactive items. Now that I go back into, or I have this item created, I do have a couple extra options when I go into the edit drawer for this item. I have a status field down at the bottom that I can set a check or a flag on this. So I can have it set as active, I can have it set as inactive, or I can have it set as discontinued. So active means simply that it's an active item. Inactive means it doesn't by default show in my inventory search. It also cannot be added to any transactions. So I can't put it on a sales transaction, I can't put it on a purchase order. It won't go into an inventory adjustment in or out. Another thing to take note of is that I cannot make an item inactive if I have inventory in the system. I would have to address that inventory, adjust it out to be able to mark it as inactive. And that's where if I do have inventory in the system and I want to deplete or deplenish or deplete that inventory, then that is where the discontinued flag comes in. So I can mark an item as discontinued even if I have inventory in the system, which will allow me to continue to place that item on sales transactions until my on hand quantity goes to 0. And at that point, I can't see it. It won't allow me to put it on a sales transaction. So I can't back order it. I can't purchase it. I can sell whatever available inventory I have until my on hand quantity goes to 0. So discontinued again is we see that used quite often for items that are no longer available from your vendor. You're just trying to sell the balance of whatever inventory you have. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of my setup screen. And again, we're back to my item card that we reviewed a few minutes ago. And again, I can see all of this information across the top of what I set up for this item. At this point, I can now put this item onto a purchase order, purchase it from my vendor. If we go look at Cigars International, who is the vendor that I specified for this item, we will have that item listed under their vendor item tab or under their items tab. So we would see the Padron 2000M on that tab, and I could go now modify that. Maybe it has its own number sequence for its vendor item number. I could give it a different vendor item description, and I could also specify a cost from this vendor. So this would be the cost that I use when I purchase from this vendor, as opposed to the purchase cost on the item.